In 1938, a young woman walked into Carl Jung's office in Zurich. Beautiful, intelligent, from a wealthy family. Everything society would consider a prize. She had become obsessed with one of Jung's patients, a man who seemed completely indifferent to her advances. "Dr. Jung," she said with tears in her eyes, "I've done everything to get his attention. I've made myself available. I've shown interest. I've made it obvious I want him. But he treats me like I'm invisible. What's wrong with me?" Jung leaned back in his chair and said something that would become foundational to his understanding of masculine power. "Nothing is wrong with you, but everything is right with him. You see, that man has discovered something most men never learn. The moment you stop needing female attention is the moment you become truly powerful. And female attention, paradoxically, becomes inevitable." The woman left confused, but Jung's patient understood perfectly. He had spent 2 years in Jungian analysis learning to integrate his anima, his unconscious feminine aspect, internally, rather than projecting it onto external women and seeking completion through their validation. He had become psychologically whole within himself, which made him completely immune to manipulation through female approval or rejection. And that immunity had transformed him into something women found irresistible precisely because he didn't need them. But here's what they never tell you about this dynamic. There's a psychological mechanism running beneath every interaction between men and women, and it operates on a principle that inverts everything you've been taught. The more you need female attention, the less you receive it. The less you need it, the more it flows toward you effortlessly. This isn't a dating strategy. It's a fundamental law of psychological power that Jung spent decades mapping. And there's a reason this knowledge has been kept from mainstream awareness, buried in academic psychology, hidden behind technical language most men never encounter. You see, a man who doesn't need female validation is a man who cannot be controlled through the primary mechanism society uses to domesticate masculine energy. Sexual access, relationship potential, female approval. These are the carrots and sticks that keep most men performing like trained animals, working jobs they hate, suppressing dreams they cherish, becoming whoever they need to be to earn the prize of female attention. But what if you could simply opt out of that entire game? What if I told you that rejecting women's attention, not from bitterness or anger, but from genuine psychological completeness, is the fastest path to becoming absolutely unstoppable? Here's the question that will haunt you tonight. What if everything you've done to attract female attention has actually been repelling it, and everything you've been afraid to do, prioritizing yourself completely, becoming indifferent to female approval, focusing entirely on your own development, is actually the magnetic force that makes you irresistible? Carl Jung discovered 7 specific psychological reasons why men who reject female attention become unstoppable forces that women chase rather than men who chase. 7 mechanisms that transform you from a supplicant, begging for scraps of validation, into a sovereign being that others desperately want access to. 7 sources of power that only activate when you completely withdraw your need for female approval and redirect that energy toward your own actualization. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal will completely invert your understanding of attraction, power, and what makes a man genuinely magnetic versus what makes him just another desperate option in the endless sea of men seeking female validation. The first reason Jung identified is what he called anima integration, and it's the most important psychological work a man can do regarding his relationship with the feminine. Inside your psyche exists what Jung termed the anima, your unconscious feminine aspect containing your emotional depth, your creative capacity, your intuition, your connection to beauty and meaning. But here's the trap most men fall into. Instead of integrating this anima internally, developing these capacities within themselves, they project it onto external women. You see a woman and suddenly she seems to carry all the beauty, meaning and emotional richness that's actually missing from your internal landscape. You become convinced that possessing her, earning her attention, winning her validation will somehow complete you, and this projection makes you weak, desperate, controllable. Jung observed that men who project their anima spend their entire lives chasing women, not because they actually want those specific women, but because they're unconsciously trying to capture and possess their own disowned psychological qualities. It's like chasing your shadow. You can run forever, but you'll never catch it because it's attached to you. But here's what happens when you withdraw those projections and do the internal work of anima integration. You develop your own emotional depth, your own creativity, your own intuition, your own sense of beauty and meaning. You become psychologically complete within yourself, which means women stop seeming like magical beings who hold the key to your fulfillment. They become just other humans. Interesting, perhaps, but no longer necessary for your psychological wholeness. And the moment this shift happens, everything changes. Women sense it immediately. They're accustomed to men who need them, who project completion onto them, who become supplicants seeking approval. But a man who has integrated his anima, who is genuinely complete within himself, who looks at women with interest but not need, this man triggers something primal in female psychology. He becomes the challenge, the unconquered territory, the man who might actually be whole enough that he doesn't require validation. Jung's patient, who that woman was obsessed with, had completed significant anima work. He enjoyed female company but didn't need it. He appreciated beauty but wasn't enslaved by it. He could connect emotionally, but his emotional life didn't depend on female participation. This internal completeness radiated from him like a frequency that women picked up instinctively. They sensed they couldn't control him through the usual mechanisms, couldn't manipulate him with attention or rejection, couldn't make him perform for approval. And that made him utterly fascinating because most men are so easy to control. The second reason rejecting female attention creates power is the reclamation of what Jung called libido, but not in the Freudian sexual sense. Jung used libido to mean psychic energy, the fundamental life force that animates your consciousness and fuels your development. When you're constantly seeking female attention, massive amounts of your libido get drained into that pursuit. You're thinking about women, strategizing how to attract them, managing your appearance and behavior to seem attractive, processing rejection, celebrating validation, riding emotional roller coasters based on female responses. All of this consumes enormous psychic energy that could be directed toward your actualization. Jung observed that men who withdraw from the chase of female attention suddenly have access to libido reserves they didn't know existed. That energy that was scattered across multiple women, multiple potential relationships, multiple validation-seeking behaviors. It all comes back and consolidates into focused force. And when you direct that consolidated energy toward your own development, your creative work, your mission, your growth, you begin moving at a velocity that men still scattered in the female attention economy cannot match. Think about it practically. How much time do you spend thinking about women, trying to attract them, managing interactions, processing outcomes? How much mental and emotional energy goes into that pursuit? Now imagine all of that energy, every bit of it, redirected toward building something, mastering something, becoming something. The difference is staggering. Men who make this shift report feeling like they've been given extra hours in the day, extra reserves of focus, extra capacity for deep work. They haven't. They've just stopped hemorrhaging energy into the bottomless pit of female validation seeking. And here's the paradox Jung loved. The moment you stop spending energy chasing female attention, you become energetically abundant. And abundance is magnetic. Women sense it the same way they sense desperation. A man who seems to have unlimited energy, focus, drive, purpose, this man seems powerful because energy is power. But a man who seems drained, scattered, desperate, he seems weak no matter how he tries to compensate. So by withdrawing from the female attention economy, you actually become more attractive, not less. But you're attractive from a position of abundance rather than seeking from a position of lack. You're not trying to get attention. You're allowing others to access your abundant energy if they prove worthy. That reversal is everything. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments because I want to know where men are waking up to these patterns and reclaiming their power. The third reason is the development of what Jung termed masculine sovereignty, the capacity to be your own validation source rather than outsourcing it to female approval. Most men are psychological colonies, their sense of worth determined by whether women find them attractive, their mood regulated by female responses, their self-concept dependent on external feminine validation. This is slavery dressed up as romance, A sovereign man generates his own sense of worth internally. He has standards he holds himself to, values he lives by, goals he measures himself against, and those internal metrics matter more than any external approval. When you reject female attention, not as a tactic but as a genuine reorientation of your validation source, you're declaring psychological independence. You're saying that your worth is not up for debate, not subject to female opinion, not determined by who finds you attractive. Jung observed that men who achieve this sovereignty move through the world with a different quality. They're not performing, not trying to impress, not managing their image for approval. They're simply being themselves with complete confidence that their worth exists independent of others' recognition. And this self-generated validation is intoxicating to witness. Women are accustomed to men who need their approval, who will modify behavior to earn validation, who collapse when criticized or rejected. But a man who genuinely doesn't need female validation, who remains stable regardless of female response, who holds his own worth as self-evident, this man seems powerful, because he is powerful. He's broken free from the most common form of masculine slavery. The fourth reason rejecting female attention makes you unstoppable is the activation of what Jung called the hero's journey, which cannot begin while you're enmeshed in the comfort of female validation. The hero's journey requires separation from the known world, venturing into dangerous territory alone, facing trials that transform you. But most men never take this journey because female attention offers a comfortable alternative. Why risk the unknown when you can stay in the safe harbor of relationship, partnership, female approval? Jung studied mythology across cultures and found the same pattern repeated. The hero must reject the temptation to stay comfortable. Odysseus must reject the sirens. Buddha must reject the dancing girls. Christ must reject Satan's offers. The symbolic message is consistent. Masculine transformation requires saying no to feminine comfort, beauty, and validation, when those things would prevent your evolution. In modern terms, this means choosing the difficult path of your own development over the easy path of female approval. It means prioritizing your mission over relationship comfort. It means being willing to be alone, to be misunderstood, to be rejected by women who want you to stay small and manageable. Most men fail this test. They get glimpses of their heroic potential but then trade it for female validation. They feel the call to adventure but suppress it because their partner needs them predictable and present. They sense they're meant for something greater but settle for something comfortable because being great would risk losing female approval. The men who reject this trade, who choose the hero's journey over female validation, they undergo transformation that men who stayed comfortable never access. They face their fears, develop their capacities, discover their power, return as fundamentally different beings. And when they return, if they choose to engage with women at all, they engage from a completely different position. They're not seeking validation from women. They're offering women the opportunity to participate in the life they've built through heroic struggle. That reversal changes everything about the dynamic. The fifth reason is the purification of masculine desire from what Jung called unconscious projections and compulsions. Most men don't actually desire the women they chase. They desire what they've projected onto those women, psychological qualities they haven't developed, external validation they haven't generated internally, completion they haven't achieved within themselves. This means their desire is not pure, it's contaminated with need, projection, unconscious seeking. When you reject female attention and spend significant time alone with your own psyche, something remarkable happens. Your desire purifies. You stop projecting your missing pieces onto women. You stop seeking them to fill voids. You stop needing them for completion. And what remains after all that contamination burns away is pure desire, conscious choice, genuine attraction that's free from unconscious compulsion. Men with purified desire are dangerous because they cannot be manipulated. Offer them sex and they'll refuse if it compromises their mission. Offer them beauty and they'll walk away if it comes with psychological cost. Offer them validation and they'll ignore it because they're already validated internally. This purity of desire makes them seem almost inhuman to women accustomed to controlling men through the predictability of their needs. But it also makes them irresistibly attractive because purity of intent, clarity of desire, freedom from desperate seeking, these qualities are rare and magnetic. Jung worked with many men to help them distinguish between pure desire and contaminated need. Pure desire says, I want you, but I don't need you, and I'll walk away if this doesn't serve my highest development. Contaminated need says, I need you to feel complete, and I'll compromise myself to keep you. The first position is powerful and attractive. The second is weak and repellent. Rejecting female attention forces you to confront which position you're operating from, and if you're honest, to purify your desire until only the powerful version remains. The sixth reason is the development of what Jung termed the capacity for creative solitude, which is fundamentally incompatible with constantly seeking female attention. Creativity, real creativity that changes things, requires you to descend into the chaos of the unconscious and bring back something new. This process demands extended periods of solitude, focus, and freedom from external validation seeking. You cannot create deeply while simultaneously managing female attention. The two activities compete for the same psychological resources. Jung noticed that history's most creative men either rejected female involvement entirely or maintained relationships that were secondary to their creative work. Newton never married, spending his energy on discovering universal laws rather than chasing women. Tesla remained single, channeling sexual energy into scientific breakthrough. Beethoven's relationships were always secondary to his music. These weren't accidents or failures, they were choices. These men understood that their creative capacity required all their energy, and splitting that energy between creation and female validation would diminish both. When you reject female attention, you're making space for creative emergence. You're saying that what you might create matters more than whether women approve of you. You're prioritizing your unique contribution over social validation. And in that space of creative solitude, you access depths that men still scattered in the attention economy never touch. You create things that men seeking female approval never create because they're too busy performing for validation to descend into the chaos where real creation happens. The seventh and most powerful reason Jung identified is the activation of what he called the self, the archetype of wholeness, that can only emerge when you're not fragmented across multiple external validation sources. The self represents the integrated totality of your conscious and unconscious psyche, the organizing principle that could make you complete. But most men never encounter the self because they're too busy fragmenting themselves across female opinions, relationship demands, and validation seeking. The self requires you to gather all your energy back from external projections, to stop asking women who you are or whether you're valuable, to turn inward and discover the organizing intelligence within your own psyche. This can only happen when you've withdrawn from the female attention economy entirely. You must stop caring whether women approve. Stop modifying yourself for female validation. Stop fragmenting your identity across multiple feminine opinions. When you do this withdrawal completely, something emerges from the depths. Jung called it the self, but you might experience it as a profound sense of knowing who you are, independent of all external input. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. Not ego inflation, but genuine recognition of your essential nature. Men who have encountered the self operate from an unshakable center. They know who they are, what they value, where they're going. Female approval or disapproval becomes irrelevant noise because they're operating from a source of identity that's deeper and more stable than any external validation. And this centeredness is profoundly attractive because most people, men and women, are scattered, fragmented, desperately seeking external sources to tell them who they are. But the man operating from the self doesn't need that, he already knows. These 7 reasons: anima integration, libido reclamation, masculine sovereignty, hero's journey activation, purification of desire, creative solitude, and self-emergence. They all depend on your willingness to reject female attention completely. Not forever necessarily, but for a significant period where you can do this psychological work without the interference of seeking validation. Jung was clear that most men will never do this. They're too addicted to female approval, too afraid of being alone, too convinced that their worth depends on whether women want them. But the few men who are brave enough to withdraw completely, to spend months or years focused entirely on their own development, without seeking or accepting female validation. They undergo a transformation that makes them fundamentally different from other men. They become psychologically complete, energetically abundant, creatively powerful, and completely immune to manipulation through female approval or rejection. And paradoxically, these men become intensely attractive to women, but they're attractive in a way that reverses the usual dynamic. Women pursue them rather than being pursued. Women compete for their attention rather than rationing their own. Women modify themselves to earn these men's approval rather than demanding these men perform for theirs. The power dynamic inverts completely. But here's what's crucial to understand. This isn't a manipulation tactic. You cannot fake indifference to female attention while secretly seeking it. Women's intuition is too sophisticated for that game. They can sense desperate indifference, strategic disinterest, calculated aloofness, and those tactics repel them as much as obvious desperation. The transformation Jung described is real, internal, permanent. You must actually become complete within yourself, actually not need female validation, actually be focused on something more important than their approval. And that requires genuine psychological work, real anima integration, actual liberation from the validation addiction that controls most men. This is why Jung's approach was always therapeutic, not strategic. He wasn't teaching men tricks to attract women. He was helping men become psychologically whole, and the attraction that resulted was a side effect of that wholeness, not the goal. The goal was always individuation, becoming your complete self, integrating all aspects of your psyche, operating from the self, rather than ego. Female attention was just one of many external addictions that had to be released for that integration to complete. You're standing at a choice point right now. Down one path lies the continuation of what you've been doing, seeking female attention, modifying yourself for approval, measuring your worth by feminine validation, remaining psychologically colonized by the need for women to confirm your value. This path is comfortable because it's familiar, but it keeps you weak, scattered, controllable, forever at the mercy of female whims and the never-ending need to perform for scraps of approval. Down the other path lies something terrifying but transformative: complete rejection of female attention for as long as it takes to do the 7 psychological processes Jung described, integrating your anima internally rather than projecting it externally, reclaiming your libido from the validation economy and redirecting it toward your actualization, developing masculine sovereignty where your worth comes from within, taking your hero's journey even if it means being alone, purifying your desire of unconscious projections and compulsions, creating in solitude without seeking approval, and encountering the self beneath all the fragmentation. This path is hard because it requires you to face yourself completely, without the distraction of female validation. It requires you to be alone and sit with that aloneness, until it transforms from painful loneliness into powerful solitude. It requires you to stop performing and start being, stop seeking and start building, stop needing and start becoming. But the men who walk this path emerge as forces of nature. They're psychologically complete, energetically abundant, creatively powerful, and utterly immune to the manipulation tactics that control other men. They've become unstoppable because nothing external can stop them. Their worth isn't up for debate. Their direction isn't subject to approval. Their power doesn't depend on validation. And women sense this immediately. They recognize that this man is fundamentally different from the desperate masses seeking approval. They feel that he's complete within himself, which makes him the rarest thing in the modern world. A man who doesn't need them, and that apparent not needing creates desperate wanting. Women want to be the one who finally captures his attention, who breaks through his completeness, who becomes the exception to his indifference. But the truly transformed man doesn't make exceptions. He remains centered in his self, open to connection but never needing it, appreciating beauty but never enslaved by it, enjoying company but never dependent on it. He's become what Jung termed the individuated man, and there's nothing more powerful or more attractive than that. Jung's 7 reasons aren't abstract philosophy. They're practical psychology that you can apply starting right now. Withdraw from seeking female attention completely. Stop scrolling profiles, stop strategizing approaches, stop trying to impress, stop performing for approval. Instead, turn all that energy inward. Start integrating your anima through creative work, emotional development, beauty appreciation that doesn't involve women. Reclaim your libido and pour it into building something that matters. Develop internal standards that define your worth independent of external validation. Take your hero's journey into whatever terrifies and calls you simultaneously. Purify your desire by distinguishing what you actually want from what you've been conditioned to seek. Create in solitude without sharing for approval. And in that space, wait for the self to emerge and reorganize your entire psyche around its integrating principle. This isn't quick. Jung's patients often worked for years to complete these processes. But the transformation is permanent because it's real psychological change, not surface-level manipulation tactics. You become a different man, operating from a different source, immune to the addictions that enslave others. Now here's what I need you to do, and this will require real courage. Write in the comments, "I reject the need." 4 words that signal you understand what Jung was teaching, that you're ready to withdraw from the female validation economy and do the internal work these 7 processes require, that you're committed to becoming psychologically complete regardless of how long it takes or how lonely it feels. The men who write those 4 words are the ones who will actually transform, who will spend the next months or years focused entirely on their own development without seeking female attention, who will emerge as the unstoppable forces Jung described. Write it now, "I reject the need." Let's see how many men are ready to stop being slaves to female validation and start being sovereign beings. Hit that subscribe button, because the journey ahead requires ongoing support. You'll need reminders when the loneliness feels crushing, when the addiction to validation screams for relief, when society tells you that rejecting female attention means something is wrong with you. You'll need content that reinforces the truth that Jung discovered, that temporary rejection of female attention is the path to permanent masculine power. Smash that like button if these 7 reasons hit you somewhere deep, if you recognized yourself in the desperate seeking Jung described, if you felt something shift inside you toward the possibility of complete psychological sovereignty. The next video takes everything you learned today and makes it dangerously practical. We're going deep into the specific techniques Jung developed for anima integration, the exact practices for reclaiming your libido, the concrete methods for developing masculine sovereignty that cannot be shaken by female rejection or approval. What you learned today is why rejecting female attention creates power. What's coming next is the precise step-by-step process for actually doing it without falling back into old patterns when the addiction screams. This is where philosophy becomes practice, where understanding becomes transformation, where boys who need validation become men who generate their own worth. Everything changes after what comes next.